The Last Letter. Part 1, A Chance Encounter. The city of Florence glowed in the fading light of the autumn sun. Soft golden hues reflected on the river Arno as the evening began to settle in. Olivia sat quietly at a small cafe on the riverside, her sketchpad in hand. A few lines danced across the page, though her mind was far from the art in front of her. She was lost in thought, pondering her move back to New York after 2 years in Italy. Her time in Florence had been an escape from a life she no longer recognized. It had been 2 years since her fiancé, Daniel, had passed away in a tragic car accident. 2 years since her world had shattered. Florence had been the place where she had tried to piece it all back together, but now it was time to face the world again, no matter how broken it seemed. As she sipped her coffee, a shadow fell across her table. "Do you mind if I sit here?" A man's voice interrupted her thoughts. Olivia looked up, slightly startled. The cafe was crowded, and only her table had a spare chair. The man standing before her was tall, with dark, disheveled hair and a gentle but worn smile. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, but there was a sadness in them that mirrored her own. "Sure," she replied, motioning toward the chair. "Thank you," he said, settling in and setting a small leather notebook on the table. His accent was British, soft and polished. For a few moments, they sat in silence. Olivia returned to her sketch, her pencil lightly tracing the edges of a building. But her concentration was gone, replaced by a strange awareness of the man sitting across from her. After a while, he broke the silence. "I'm James, by the way." "Olivia," she replied with a polite smile, though she still felt guarded. "You're an artist?" he asked, glancing at her sketchpad. "I try to be," she said, giving a little shrug. "It's more of a hobby." "You're quite talented," James commented, his eyes tracing the careful lines she had drawn. "Thank you," Olivia said quietly, her fingers tightening around the pencil. They fell back into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was something familiar, almost comforting, about his presence. She didn't know why, but she felt a subtle pull toward him, as if he, too, carried a weight that only someone like her could understand. Part 2, Shared Stories. Over the next few days, Olivia found herself running into James more often. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes on the bridge overlooking the river, sometimes at the small bookstore she frequented. It was never planned, but always felt serendipitous. Soon, they began to spend time together, talking about their lives, their pasts, and the things they were running from. James, it turned out, was a writer, but he hadn't written anything in months. He had come to Florence for inspiration, but much like Olivia, he was trying to escape something. His wife, Hannah, had left him a year ago. Their marriage had crumbled under the weight of unspoken grief and years of drifting apart. Now, James carried the pain of not only losing her, but also the life they had once built together. In each other, Olivia and James found a strange solace. They were both lost, both broken in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. But in their shared stories, they found a connection, a quiet understanding that neither had expected. One evening, after a long walk along the river, they sat on the steps of a bridge, watching the water ripple beneath them. "I thought I'd never be able to feel anything again," Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After Daniel died, everything just felt numb." James didn't respond right away. He simply reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. "I know," he said softly. "I thought the same thing when Hannah left. But, maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we can still feel something." Olivia turned to look at him, her heart pounding in her chest. There was something unspoken between them, something fragile and delicate, but undeniable. She wanted to run from it, to push it away, but at the same time, she longed to hold on to it. Before she could say anything, James spoke again. "Sometimes, I think the hardest part is letting go of what we thought our lives were supposed to be," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But maybe there's something else waiting for us. Something better." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. She had spent so long holding on to the past, holding on to Daniel's memory, that she hadn't allowed herself to imagine a future without him. But now, sitting beside James, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could let go. Part 3, The Last Letter. Weeks passed, and Olivia and James grew closer. Their days together were filled with long walks, quiet conversations, and stolen moments of laughter. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt like she was beginning to heal. But just as she began to open her heart to the possibility of love again, a letter arrived in the mail. It was addressed to her in handwriting she recognized immediately, Daniel's. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Inside was a letter he had written before the accident, one she had never received. It was a goodbye letter, written during a trip he had taken for work, just days before his death. In the letter, Daniel spoke of his love for her, of his dreams for their future, and of the hope that she would find happiness, even if he wasn't there to share it with her. He had sensed something, a strange premonition that their time together might be cut short, and he wanted to leave her with one last message. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she read the words, her heart breaking all over again. But as she reached the end of the letter, something shifted inside her. Daniel's words were filled with love, but also with a quiet acceptance. He didn't want her to hold on to the past. He wanted her to move forward, to live, to love again. That evening, Olivia went to meet James by the river. She found him sitting on their usual bench, a book in his hands. When he looked up and saw her tear-stained face, his expression softened. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Olivia nodded, though her heart was still heavy. She sat down beside him, the letter clutched in her hands. "I got a letter today," she said quietly. "From Daniel." James didn't say anything. He simply waited, giving her the space to speak. "It was a goodbye letter," Olivia continued, her voice breaking. He wanted me to be happy. Even if it wasn't with him." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then, Olivia turned to James, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know what happens next," she said softly. "But I think I'm ready to find out." James reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. His touch was warm, steady, and filled with a quiet promise. "Then let's find out together," he whispered. As the sun set over the river, casting a golden glow over the water, Olivia felt something inside her begin to heal. The past would always be a part of her, but for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something she could embrace. And with James by her side, she was ready to face it.